Yeah, this is a multi-layered question. Because I feel probably like everyone here, I've sat on both sides of the fence. I've been the bereaved person, but I've also tried to be a comforting shoulder, arm person on the other side of a text message who's trying to comfort somebody who's bereaved. Um, and it's tricky because, like the title of this seminar, there's a pressure to say the right thing, do the right thing, and to have an outcome of feel better. Um, and it's so tricky. I think one of the things that we can do to support grieving people is to ask questions like, if you could tell me anything about your loss right now, what would that be? Or tell me a way that you would like to be supported right now, what would that be? Because I think grieving people, so often, myself included, we want to teach other people how to help us grieve, and we feel sometimes that we must, because the westernized world doesn't really do it for us. It doesn't teach our friends and family how to best support grieving people. And so often I'm like, well, crap, I've got to teach the people around me what I actually want and need right now, as opposed to, she's in a better place. She's with God now. Don't worry, she didn't suffer. I'm like, none of this is helpful to me. Here's what I wish you would say. And so, permission to allow me to hand you those tools or those words or those phrases, but also a permission, I think, to not know what I want, and so to be asked, would it feel good right now to receive a hug? Would it be okay if I brought dinner over on Friday and just left it on the porch because I know we're socially distancing right now? Or would it be okay if I kind of step back now but check in with you in 6 months when everybody else disappears? Is that okay if that's something that I do for you? And allowing grieving people to respond like yes or no, that feels, again, not spectrum of right or wrong, but spectrum of better or worse. So it gives you a little more breathing room there. And one of my favorite things, I'm actually working on a third book right now about 3 tiny phrases we can use to comfort grieving people. And I'll share the first one, and that's of course. Whatever you're going through, whatever thoughts are racing through your head, whatever you want or feel compelled to do, in the aftermath of loss, you're not crazy for wanting it or thinking it or wishing it were real. Of course, that would be real for you. And so when Andy was speaking to this desire to scream, or I have this own desire to scream in the aftermath of my mother's death, I'm like, I'm going to go crazy. Nobody's going to want to be around me. I'm going to get arrested. But I want to scream. And for somebody to come up and say, of course, that makes total sense that you just want to shriek because your mom is dead. Like that would have given me so much. I'm like shoulders relaxing, chest opening, permission, freedom to be able to experience that. And so when you're speaking to somebody who's grieving, you can see them winding themselves into the stratosphere of why they shouldn't be feeling a certain way, or they start putting themselves in that little box. Sometimes the most freeing thing you can hear is of course, or that makes total sense to me why you would feel that way.
So
You
yeah,
don't have to
so
understand.
listening and validating. Yes, I'm getting from you.
Yes.
They need to be listened to. They need to be heard, and their needs validated, and maybe even encouraged to take that step of whatever that impulse is.
Yes, and it's different from I understand how you feel, which can
Yeah,
feel insulting to grieving people, or like, how could you possibly? Because you haven't lost a parent or a child or a spouse or whoever we're losing, but it's it's a human recognition of I see how you got there. Yeah.
Because that's really important. I find that really chimes with me because it's particularly those situations when if someone was to say to me, I understand how you feel, then, well, that's a bit of a surprise. I don't understand how I feel myself, in that situation, I haven't got a clue. And I think it is, as you say, Shelby, it's important to give space for that because I think what can arise if that doesn't happen is shame and guilt and repressed anger, and it gets pushed into our bodies, and it comes back 6 months later as chronic migraines and back pain and stomach ulceration and things like that. So it is important to give that sort of contained space, really. The prospect that I might have to grieve a particular way is caustic to us. But I think certainly, at Cruise, and I know we've got a lot of learning to do around this, no doubt. But we're finding it increasingly interesting and important to think about, well, how do we look at this when once again, like I said before, there are so many cultures that have societal norms over how to grieve and rituals to grieve that are so vastly important and need credibility and need understanding. And also there's difference between those. And I think there's something around um, creating space that if you're the person who is going to support the person who's bereaved, actually, how do you give space to try and understand this? Not just this individual is different from me, but where they come from, their heritage, their context, their culture, their race, their gender, their sexuality, their everything. All of these factors can come into play with difference, and also this commonality in that we are both human beings. And holding the commonality in difference, I think, together is important.